Tonight, a shocked Muslim community reacts as former Muslim MP and his brother shot dead during a live broadcast in India, followed by a chilling Hindutva slogan by the gunman. And G7 members vow unwavering support for Ukraine, with promises of international cooperation amidst changing geopolitical alliances. Later in the show, a UN address about environmental genocide in Kashmir. The speaker, Tazeen Hassan, from Justice for All Canada, explains.
War and conflict has a major disastrous effect on climate.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I'm Catherine Bullock. 3 men are in police custody after they shot dead a former Muslim Indian Member of Parliament and his brother on a live TV broadcast in Uttar Pradesh, India. The disturbing incident occurred as the victims were headed for a hospital handcuffed and stopped briefly to answer questions from reporters. The gunmen were posing as journalists. The former MP had been facing charges of murder and assault. Last month, he claimed in a petition that his life was under threat from the police. In the live broadcast, the assailants can be seen shouting far-right Hindu slogans. A New Brunswick Muslim woman is sharing a video on social media of a racist experience in a grocery market in her hometown of Caraquet. The 20-second video shows a man making Islamophobic comments to the young woman in the store. The woman, who is from Algeria, says she was assisting a newcomer with their groceries when a man approached her, raising his voice. He told her she is not welcome in Canada and should go back. The woman says these statements and these kinds of people need to be exposed. The mayor of the town calls the incident, quote, unacceptable. Top diplomats from the G7 are in Karazawa, Japan, discussing issues including international cooperation and the Ukraine war. A representative of the EU is also attending the meetings. The G7 includes Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the US. Yoshimasa Hayashi, Japan's foreign minister and host of the summit, said today it is Tokyo's priority to enhance engagement with international partners to face global challenges. The G7 diplomats called on Moscow to withdraw all forces and equipment from Ukraine immediately. They also said Russia's nuclear rhetoric is, quote, unacceptable. G7 leaders will meet next month in a summit in Hiroshima. In a video circulating on social media, 2 people can be seen walking into a Jamiat al-Ansar mosque in Brampton, Ontario, stealing cash, credit cards, phones, keycards, and a car. Clad in hoodies, one of the suspects' faces becomes clearly visible once she removes the hoodie. She appears to be somewhere in her late teens to early 20s. In the footage, the 2 suspects can be seen moving around the mosque looking for objects. Then they can be seen driving away in a red car that was in the parking lot. Muslim News Canada has not verified the authenticity of the video. Please stay tuned. We will join you after a short break.
Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak. I'm here to ask you to support something which you are watching right now, Muslim Network Television. Just like PBS, NPR, or even your masjid, we depend on your donations. We broadcast Muslims, we put Muslims on air, we bring good news, we counter negative media with positive media. And here is an example. When the terrible earthquakes hit Turkey and Syria, Muslim Americans donated $100 million within 5 days. That was more than what US government gave in the same time. Getting our news out is what Muslim Network does. This Ramadan, stand for your community. Donate to Muslim Network. Do it now. Visit muslimnetwork.tv. Thank you so much and Assalamu alaikum.
Our next guest, Tazeen Hassan from Justice for All Canada, has been busy in New York speaking at a session called the 7th Expert Mechanism on the Right to Development. To talk to us about what she was explaining to this panel and what it's all about, she joined us now. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Walaikum assalam, Kathy. Thank you very much for inviting me.
What was your address to this expert panel about?
This expert panel is basically, as you mentioned, it's about right to development, and United Nations is going to bring a declaration like Universal Declaration of Human Rights on this issue, the right to development for each and every nation. And when I got the invitation, as you might know, that Justice for All has the DTC status at the United Nations, a consultative status. And they invited us, and I got the invitation, and I looked at the expert mechanism issues, and climate change was the issue that was very close to my heart. And I have been working, as we recorded a session in December with you regarding the environmental genocide. Actually, Canadian MNTV, Canadian News basically is the first channel who mentioned environmental genocide on their channel in our interview in December. So yeah, I talked about environmental genocide in Kashmir, the melting of Himalayan glaciers, and the consequences for the Kashmiri people and for the people in Pakistan.
I would like to ask you some more about that in a moment. I don't want to dwell too much on the mechanics of all of it, but this just seems like a very strange title, something called an expert mechanism. Are you able to just tell us what is this panel, like who are you talking to and what's their role there? What can they bring about after listening to you?
Basically, expert mechanism conference, this included representatives from different countries. And then the second group of people were from NGOs. And then there were experts and academics who were engaged by United Nations. They came from Geneva, basically.
What's going to be the end product? Like, what are they able to achieve after listening to the people like yourself make addresses?
So basically, they say that they are going to devise a mechanism for the right to development for different nations. Every nation has the right to develop. Every human being should get equal opportunities. And as I mentioned, that they are going to devise a mechanism, and this meeting was for the consultation from different NGOs, to listen the representatives of different countries, from different NGOs, and from academics and the experts. And they already had published some reports, so we discussed the reports during the sessions.
Was your main ask or main point then in this concept of the right to development that the Kashmiri people under Indian occupation don't have this right because the occupation is threatening that?
Definitely. I mentioned that in my more than 3 minutes speech, actually, I mentioned that the Kashmiri people have no agency. They are occupied, and because of that, they can't make their own policies. They don't have the right of development of their own. And Indian government's policies are damaging the environment to an extent that we can call it an environmental genocide.
And so you tried to make a link between environmental genocide and the right to development. Can you just explain that a little more?
Yeah, basically, I recommend that United Nations and this expert mechanism should start a study to start investigation on this issue. My main recommendation was that Kashmiri people, I mean, climate change is a big issue. If human rights and climate change coincide, we know. And war and conflict has a major disastrous effect on climate. And United Nations expert mechanism for the right to development, they should start a study. So we are going to submit a memo to the Special Rapporteur of the United Nations expert mechanism to initiate a study on the climate change in Kashmir. Why Himalayan glaciers are melting so rapidly. What are the effects of Indian Army stationed over 500,000 to about 1 million Indian Army is stationed in Kashmir, and the disastrous effect of their deployment in Kashmir, and also the religious tourism. Unrestricted religious tourism in Kashmir is also harming the Himalayan glaciers, and that is disastrous. So I definitely made a connection between right to development, human rights, and the environmental damage.
One of the words that you used in your address was a big word, I'm reading it and making a mistake, anthropogenic. which means, tell us what it means, and then I'm going to ask you a follow-up question.
Anthropogenic is basically the effects on the climate due to the human activity.
So I saw a broadcast from an Indian channel. I don't know much about, who owns what broadcast in India, but this was about climate change affecting the melting glaciers in Kashmir. And I wondered if there was a political underside to this particular newscast, because you emphasized in your address human activity, anthropogenic, human activity causing these glacier meltings. And this broadcast was emphasizing just climate change as if it's something that we, have no responsibility about. I wonder if you could comment on that.
Of course, if you see Indian channels, they will just comment on climate change, and they will say that this is the result of human activity. But what human activity? I emphasized in my speech that this is not just the consequences of the normal human activity, natural human activity of the indigenous Kashmiris. It is exacerbated by the activity of over 500,000 Indian Army deployment and the unrestricted religious tourism. And regarding the unrestricted religious tourism, there are various climate change reports in the Indian issued by the Indian government departments, but Indian government is not ignoring them. There are reports since 1996. There was a disaster there at that time, and many of the religious pilgrims were actually killed in a windstorm there. And after that, Indian government conducted a climate change study. And there are reports, but current Indian government especially, is ignoring those reports. The reports in 1996 actually recommend Indian government to put a limit to the religious pilgrimage. And Indian government did not do that actually in Kashmir. They have been doing that in other states of India regarding the same issue, climate change and melting of glaciers, but they are not doing that in Kashmir.
That's very unfortunate, but we know that it's kind of normal for reports like this to get ignored by governments. And I wonder if you feel optimistic or pessimistic. You mentioned earlier in the interview that you have asked this expert mechanism to conduct a study, but are you worried that it's just going to end up like another one of those reports gathering dust on a shelf?
You never know. But, whenever we are working on these things, I mean, when Universal Declaration of Human Rights was under process, we don't know what will be the effect of those. But this is important to bring these issues, highlight these issues. This is the first step. If you want to bring change, you have to raise your voice on the platforms available. And I think expert mechanism was a good platform. There were academics, there were experts, there were representatives from different governments, including India and Pakistan, and there were NGOs who can raise voice. But climate change was the only, Justice for All was the only NGO that raised voice regarding the climate change disaster in Kashmir.
If that is the case, then did you find that you were a lone voice, isolated, or you were sort of like a leader, a pioneer voice, and others were saying, oh, wow, yes, we hadn't thought of that, and that you got support?
Actually, I got support from one of the UN member who came from Geneva. She mentioned Justice for All in her concluding speech. And definitely they talked about climate change, but not specifically about Kashmir. So yeah, Justice for All was a leader there. And and the chair of the Right to Development, he asked me to submit the proposal for this study. And he said that we will be taking a consultation from Justice for All.
Well, we wish you well for your future work that is now laid out in front of you, but we're out of time for the rest of the interview. Thanks for joining us, Tazeen.
Thank you very much, Sister Kathy. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for watching. Please log on to our website, muslimnetworktv, to donate or scan the QR code on the broadcast. Thank you for watching, so that we can continue to amplify the voices of Muslims in Canada and abroad.